Welcome to the Teacher's Guide for Remote Learning during school closures and beyond. How to teach. There are 3 key tasks in designing and implementing remote learning: identifying what content to teach, knowing the learning profile, status, and needs of the students, and deciding how you will deliver remote learning. How involves the design and implementation of remote learning. There are 6 steps that will help: conduct a self-assessment, find support, determine your resources, structure learning, providing student support, and planning for assessment. The first thing to do is to conduct a teacher self-assessment to help you know if you are ready for remote teaching. Ask yourself, how has my role as a teacher changed as a result of school closures? Am I prepared to take on this role physically, intellectually, mentally, and emotionally? Do I need extra training? The second task is finding teacher support. Teaching remotely won't be easy, but there are ways to find the support you need. Ask yourself, what kind of support do I need? Are there any official channels for teacher support like hotlines, help desks, or online groups? Are there any informal support groups I should know about? Also ask yourself, should I form my own support group with teachers from my school or other schools? The third task is determining your resources. Consider what is available to you and your students to help you adapt your strategies and materials. Ask yourself, what technologies, tools, and resources are available to me and my students, such as web, radio, print, video, mobile, TV? Remember to think about which of these all or most students can use. Then ask yourself, which are easiest to use for communication, direct instruction, discussion, sharing work, and assessment? Also ask yourself, what teaching and learning materials can I adapt for remote learning? Are there open educational resources that are of good quality and safe to use? The fourth task is to structure learning. How you structure remote learning depends on what you're teaching, who you're teaching, and your own capabilities and available resources. There are 3 most likely scenarios. A. You are expected to teach structured lessons and complete the standard curriculum as always. B. Your structured lessons will focus mainly on core knowledge and skills. C. You will focus on content and activities that will help students cope with the current crisis. Let's say you are doing Scenario A or Scenario B, structured lessons to teach curricular content or core skills. If you will hold a remote class, consider how long and how often should our remote classes be? How do we communicate with each other? Is cost a consideration? Do the students and teacher work at the same time, different times, or a blend of both? Also, do I need to modify my lectures and presentations? What other materials do I need to adapt or develop? Do I need to simplify old activities or create new ones for my students to accomplish by themselves or with help from their parents or caregivers? How can I help them own their learning process through self-direction, discovery, inquiry, and collaboration? How much time will I give them for each activity? To facilitate activities, ask yourself, will they work individually or in groups? How do I give my students guidance while they work? Will I do it one-on-one, in small groups, or to the whole class? What tasks will I assign caregivers, and how can I work with them to keep their children engaged, making progress in their learning? Don't forget about psychosocial well-being and inclusion. Ask yourself, How do I support my students mentally and emotionally as they take on the challenge of remote learning? How do I balance their psychosocial well-being with the demands of the curriculum? What resources and tools can I offer them to help them cope better? How do I work with parents and caregivers to achieve this balance? Finally, do I have students with limited or no access to the internet or to phones? How do I communicate, and how often should I communicate with them? What alternative, direct instructional resources, activities, and assessments do I need to prepare for them? How will I facilitate their learning and check on their progress? What alternative arrangements will I need to make for them with my school principal and with their parents or caregivers? Now, if you're doing Scenario C, then your primary objective is to support your students through the current crisis. Communication. How do I discuss the current crisis with my students in a way that will help them deal with confusion, anxiety, or fear? What developmentally appropriate activities can help them understand the crisis, create normalcy and routine, and make them feel safe? How much work can I give them, and at what pace without creating more stress for them and their families? How can I best work with parents and caregivers to achieve these goals? What do I need to do to better equip myself to be mindful, responsive, and supportive? The fifth subtask is providing student support and feedback. You will need to plan for and implement supportive tasks before, during, and after teaching activities. Ask yourself, what kinds of scaffolds should I give my student to guide them through tasks? What communication channels and tools should I use so my students get timely feedback? How do I support them mentally and emotionally and keep them motivated? How do I encourage my students to learn from and support each other? The final task is to plan for assessment. Assessments enable you to monitor and facilitate your students' progress and help your students manage their own learning. Find a good balance between effective and feasible to do it remotely. Ask yourself, how do I provide formative assessment? What tasks can I embed in learning activities? What tools can I use to give my students regular feedback and keep their work aligned to the learning objectives? What tasks can I give them to enable them to reflect on what they are learning and communicate these insights to their classmates and me? Also ask yourself, how do I provide summative assessment? What summative assessment tools can I use? What are the pros and cons of using these tools? Let's review and reflect. The video series on the Teacher's Guide for Remote Learning is meant to aid your decision-making for the rapid startup and continuity of learning. It asks you to reflect on what to teach, who to teach, and how to teach so that you can build your remote teaching plan. Onwards and upwards, teacher! Remember, technology is just a tool. It's your commitment, creativity, and caring that will spell the difference in your students' remote learning experience. Brought to you by the TPD Scale Coalition and made possible with support from the United States Agency for International Development and the International Development Research Center. Contributing members of the coalition: Foundation for Information Technology Education and Development Incorporated, SUMMA Laboratory of Education Research and Innovation for Latin America and the Caribbean, RTI International, and the Education University of Hong Kong Faculty of Education and Human Development.